Thank you for tuning in to Roach Radio, your one-stop shop for all your niche music needs. Now, typically Roach is here hosting, but for the time being, you're stuck with me, Braden Meyer. Now, you may have noticed that we're in a different set than usual, and this is because today we're going to be going over my favorite records, right here. Some of you might be saying, Braden, this is very pretentious of you to be going over your records, and you're right to assume that, because you might assume that my music taste is better than yours, which it is. Pulling down the facade real quick, I'm not saying anyone's music taste is better than anyone else's. I'm just showing off mine because I really enjoy most of the records I buy, and I thought it'd be nice to show them off to you. So I guess until Roach gets here, we should go ahead and get started. First up on our list is 7 Inches of Satanic Panic, or Kiss the Go-Goat by Ghost. This single is a 45 record. It has 2 songs on there, one of which I'm not a huge fan of, but why I like this record so much is because they claim it was recorded in 1969, and this is the 50th anniversary remastering of it. But Ghost has only been around since 2010, and they released a 50th anniversary for an album that was never made in 1969. Perfect. Now that my audio capture is no longer in shot, we can continue. Sorry about that. So the band Ghost has a lot of lore behind it. I won't go into too much detail, but basically each album has a different papa singing for the band, and behind them are all the nameless ghouls playing the instruments. And with each album that comes out, there is a new papa. And supposedly in 1969, when this was recorded, Papa Nil was the current singer. For the band's debut album in 2010, there was Papa Emeritus the first, then the second, third, Cardinal Copia. Oh, and I think there was the fourth, and then Cardinal Copia. And I think now we're on Papa the fifth. I'm pretty sure. The nameless ghouls have always remained anonymous from the public, but Papa Emeritus had his identity revealed in, I believe, 2017, 2018, when 2 of the former Ghost members tried to sue Papa. And I'm not going to say his real name because it's out there in the universe, and some people just want to keep that a secret for themselves, and I don't blame them. That's kind of cool if they want to keep that image together, but there it is. Now, the 2 songs in this album are Kiss the Go-Goat, which I'm not a huge fan of because I just don't really feel it for the song. But the second track, Mare on a Cross, is my absolute favorite. It's got kind of a melancholy tone to it. The chorus is just really nice to listen to. And if I'm being honest, I just really like singing it. I'd also like to mention that these records are not in any particular order my favorite. I'm just going through them as I found them in my record collection. Next up is the original soundtrack to Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This compilation album features 19 songs, 15 of which were written by various artists, like the Rolling Stones or Metric or T-Rex, but 4 of them were written for the movie by Beck Hansen, but in the movie they are performed by the actual actors in the fictitious band Sex Bob-omb. For example, that's Michael Cera there playing the bass. And while Beck Hansen wrote the song, Michael Cera did learn how to play the bass for the film, just as the actor for Kim and the actor for this guy, whose name I can't remember, also learned how to play the instruments for the film. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure they learned how to play the instruments for the film. Not 100% on that, though. Edgar Wright is sort of a household name when it comes to mixing music in film, and I think this film is what really established his reputation with that sort of niche in the film industry. Now, I said needle drop earlier. A needle drop is when a film features a song that wasn't specifically written for the movie, but I think for the case of Scott Pilgrim, a lot of the songs were picked out in pre-production for the film so that the film was pretty much shot around the song. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. I'm not totally sure though, but judging by how the way I edit film together, I usually have a song picked out so that when I'm in the editing booth, it flows better, and I feel that same kind of flow when I'm watching this movie. All of these songs are extremely different, and while I don't like every song on the album, I can't deny that they all flow really well with the film and with each other. The tone provided by the songs to the scene is not just added, they're synonymous. The scene was written for the song, just in the same way the song was picked out for the film. So without that song, you don't have the exact scene that you're supposed to be seeing. Next up is Rising by the band Rainbow. So Richie Blackmore is one of my most favorite guitarists. His work with Deep Purple, his independent stuff, The Outlaws, hasn't had the most influence on me, but I just can't stop listening to whatever this guy makes. So Richie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio wrote this album pretty much together while they were in Munich, but the other session musicians were there to contribute, but I can't really speak for how much of their influence actually made it onto the album. I can say that the keyboardist had a really big part in it. I love how sweeping some of his keyboard methods are. They're absolutely beautiful, but I can't really speak to how much he actually wrote, because there's a big chance that Richie Blackmore wrote most of it and just had him do it. Who knows? So Ronnie James Dio is a true master of vocals and rock and metal in his own feet. He was the vocalist for Black Sabbath, his own independent work, and a Beach Boys-esque surf rock band called Ronnie Dio and the Prophets. His voice is just really good for storytelling, and it really shows in the song Stargazer on this album. And this is also back in the good old days when album covers were painted. Like, look at this. This is beautiful. It's so nice. I went to, oh my god, I just realized there's a person there. Holy crap. But when I was in a record store one time, I had like 5 things in my hands that I wanted, and then I saw this, and I put them all down just so I could afford to get that. That's how much I love this album. Next up is Outworld by this band that I can't pronounce. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't like this record. I only bought it because it was advertised as having a bright green record, which I needed as a prop for a film so that I could key out the record and move into it like it was a portal type of situation. In fact, here's the clip I'm talking about. I wanted to use a bright green record so that I could key it out easier, but when I got the record, it was transparent green, so it didn't work at all. It was too reflective. Now, the music is like synthwave and lo-fi, which is cool, but it's scattered with a bunch of sound bites from the original Mortal Kombat games, which, again, sounds like a cool concept, but it's through the entire song. I'm going to go ahead and feature one of the songs just because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get flagged for it. Here's a pretty good example.
Johnny Cage.
14 tracks, all named after Mortal Kombat fighters, and some of which are featuring some independent artists with some pretty whack-ass names. Some of the featured artists are Nazim the Architect, Young Bazooka, Jonathan Joestar, and Shampoo God. It's a fun album. Next up is Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. So this album and this band in particular are beautiful spectacles of psychedelic rock. And the thing about Pink Floyd is that you can't usually listen to one song individually. You have to listen to the album in its entirety to get the full effect. More often than not, listening to a Pink Floyd track without the context of the other songs around it is like ordering a pizza but only eating the crust. There are some radio-friendly songs on here, meaning that you can listen to them without the context of the rest of the album, but like I said, you lose a lot of the nuance that the rest of the album provides. Wish You Were Here is a beautifully tragic story about an artist who eventually sells out to please the industry and how he becomes a part of that machine. It's also about how the machine itself can destroy the artist, and it's a direct reference to Syd Barrett, the founding member of Pink Floyd, who left the band, I believe, a year before this album's conception and recording. He had left the band already, but when this album was written, he had literally disappeared a year before. And while the album was being recorded, Syd Barrett actually showed up in the studio, but he was so different that nobody recognized him. He'd put on weight, he went bald, he was just completely different. This is what he looked like, and this is what he looked like when he showed up at the studio. It's shocking. It was even more shocking for them because they didn't even get to talk to him before he left, and they didn't see him again until they found out that he died, I believe in 2006. The title track of this album, Wish You Were Here, was actually the track that I mentioned before that I made the music video for when I needed the green record. Next up is Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire by Joel McNeely. I am a huge Star Wars fan. According to my mother, I was humming the Star Wars theme before I could even talk. Now, my ex-roommate and my current roommate both somehow have an original print record of the original soundtrack for the original Star Wars movie. But this is all I have. This record is actually a soundtrack for an audiobook that I haven't read. This is Fly By Night by Rush. Now, Rush is one of my most favorite bands right now. I really can't stop listening to them. But this is their sophomore album, the second one to come out, and the first one to feature Neil Peart as the lyricist and the drummer. Neil's drumming was absolutely stellar in the album, and he's regarded as one of the best drummers in rock. And his lyrics were just absolute poetry. The problem was, though, that Neil Peart wasn't the singer, Geddy was. And so when Neil gave Geddy the lyrics, Geddy was like, dude, this is way too much words for a few lines. And they thought that he wasn't going to work as a lyricist, but eventually Geddy just kind of worked with him, and now they make stellar music with beautifully written lyrics that I'm glad Geddy put up with, because I love the way he sings. He's got a great voice. I love the stories that Neil Peart tells with the lyrics, and it's just something about listening to Rush. I can't get enough of them. Not to insult Rush's debut album, but this is when Rush really stepped into their own, and I fully believe that it's because of Neil, because this is when their lyrics changed, this is when their rhythm changed, and ever since this album, this is what they sound like. I'm going to go ahead and get my other Rush album out of the way. This is 2112. So before the album came out, Rush had produced maybe 4 albums by now. I think this is their 4th album. And at the time, they were very close to breaking up because they just weren't getting a return from their work. And so amongst themselves, they decided, hey, we're going to do whatever we want on this album because it might be our last, so we might as well go out with a bang. And after this album came out, their careers were sealed. They could do whatever they wanted from this point on. They made the conscious decision to do exactly what they wanted without appealing to the industry, and it launched them into stardom. In fact, my mug I'm drinking from is a reference to the album. So if you know me, you know I like concept albums, and side A of this album is a story being told. Side B doesn't really have anything to do with it, but side A is its own story. The album tells the story of a dystopian future where music and artistic expression are banned and illegal. A citizen of this society discovers a music studio and a guitar, and he starts playing it, and he discovers how beautiful it sounds, and he brings it to the sort of leaders of this time that started the whole music oppression movement. And when the main character brings forward the music, he says, hey, this is something beautiful that I've discovered. The leaders tell them, like, no, this is outlawed, this is not okay, and they take the guitar away from him. And the man is so distraught by losing the arts of music that he kills himself. And in the last track, I forget what they call themselves, but the sort of New World Order shows up, and they quote, have assumed control, and they try to bring back art and expression and all the beauty that the main character just killed himself over because he couldn't attain it. The song Discovery specifically is really nice because in the beginning you just hear running water, you hear some beautiful light nature sounds, and then you start to hear like really subtle guitar notes as the citizen discovers the guitar, and he starts tuning it, he starts playing it, and suddenly he has a rhythm going, and the rhythm gets more complicated, and it's so beautiful. Garage Days Revisited, the $5.98 EP by Metallica. This is a compilation cover album recorded and released during the era of Metallica, where Jason Newsted was the bassist, and it was actually released before And Justice for All came out, so technically, this is the first album that features Jason Newsted as the bassist. I'm not entirely fond of this album because I'm not a huge fan of the tracks that are on it, but one day I was hanging out with a buddy and I was, flexing the fact that I had all of the Metallica albums on CD. And he looked at me and said, "No, you don't. You don't have this one." And he Googled it up and he showed me this album. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I've never seen or heard of that before. And so we just kind of moved on from the topic. And the next day, I went to a record store in Austin because that's just what I like to do when I'm in Austin. And I found it just by chance. Like, I had never heard of the album. Then my buddy told me about it. And the next day, I found it. And I bought it on the spot. I'm honestly kind of a simp for Metallica. They can release anything and I'll buy it. This is Berserker Part 1 by Metallica. This is a live album that was recorded right after the release of Load back in 1996. They did a tour where they were kind of promoting the album, and this specific recording was when they were in, I believe, Denmark. There is a Berserker 2 out there, and I want it. Now, I can't speak for Berserker Part 2, but for Berserker Part 1, I believe the first disc has a lot of their original songs, like original songs, like from Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, while the second half has their later songs like Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, and some of the songs that were on Load. Next up is Redneck Vikings from Hell by Aether Realm. Aether Realm is a melodic death metal band that's based out of California, and the first time I saw Aether Realm was when I first fell in love with them. Me and some buddies were at a concert for, I believe it was Glory Hammer and Ailstorm, when this band opened up for them, and they blew us away. We came for Ailstorm and Glory Hammer, but we wanted to stay for them. We wanted more of these guys. They were just absolutely tearing it up. Not long after we saw that band, they started promoting this album, and we bought it on the spot. Now, see, I'm not a huge fan of death metal, but this is melodic death metal, in which they are better. I can't really explain why, but I just don't like death metal all that much, but I really like melodic death metal because it's a lot more music-based. It's a lot less droning on, and the lyrics are nicer. I don't know. I really can't explain why I like Aether Realm so much. I just do. I actually saw these guys a few months back at Come and Take It Live in Austin, and I didn't recognize any of the songs, but I got to meet Chris, which was pretty sick. If you're interested, I would definitely check out their sophomore album, Tarot. Here's a step in a different direction. This is Pretty Odd by Panic at the Disco. I love pretty much every song on this album. This, along with Vices and Virtues, are my absolute favorite Panic at the Disco albums, but I don't have Vices and Virtues on vinyl, so who cares? I love the pop folk sound it has. It's jaunty, it's fun, and it's one of the few albums that I have that are actually happy. I love all of my albums. They all make me so happy, but this is the one album that I would consider to have an uplifting tone. Yeah, they have some sad lyrics here and there, but the music itself just puts me in a great mood. Personally, I cannot stand Panic at the Disco's first album. I got burnt out on Death of a Bachelor, and I haven't even listened to Pray for the Wicked yet, so I can't really say much about it, but this, Vices and Virtues, and I keep forgetting the name, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, is also very great. It's third place for me. What I'm trying to say is I miss Ryan Ross, because I believe it was after Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die came out, where Panic at the Disco became a solo act with just Brandon Urie, and in my opinion is when they started going downhill. Next up is the Black Pearl LP by Black Label Society. This cool-ass record also only has 2 songs on it. Now, the song Black Pearl on side A is not my favorite song by Black Label Society, but side B, Having Spoken the Wheel, is my #1 favorite song by them, and I bought it immediately. Another Spoken the Wheel is it's my favorite song because I relate to the lyrics a lot. The instrumentation is beautiful. I saw it, I heard it, the original version. I heard it live and it sounded different. I heard an acoustic version and it sounded different. And This is a completely different version too, and they all slap. And then this one specifically blew my socks off. Next up is Deep Tomb by Deep Tomb. So this is a random record that I found at a record shop. The cover art got me. It definitely struck me as a black metal album, but when I played it, it sounded like the perfect mix between doom and black metal. And that is right down Main Street for me. I had never heard of this band before. I liked the cover. I had a good feeling about it, and it slapped. Like, it was like one of the best random purchases in terms of music that I've ever made. Next up, we're going to be talking about some of the CDs I have, and he's here? Oh, okay, cool. I was just notified that Roach is now in the building, so I guess I'll be leaving you at his expense. Thank you very much. Hey guys, thank you for tuning into Roach Radio. I'm your typical host, Roach. Thank you for tuning back in once again, and thank you for putting up for my intern, Braden. But let's get back to what we were doing. I should also mention we're entering the unscripted portion of this video. So first up, we have Ronnie James Dio, This Is Your Life. Now, unfortunately, this song does not feature Ronnie James Dio because he passed away a couple years before this album came out. What this is a compilation album of a bunch of artists who loved and appreciated Dio and covered a bunch of his songs. And if you look closely, you can see Corey Taylor from Slipknot and Stone Sour. You can see Jack Black up there. You see James Hetfield from Metallica. Ian, whatever his name is, from Slayer. Lemmy Kilmister, who unfortunately passed away not long after this. They got even more people on the back, but you get the idea. So this was actually some of my first exposure to Dio. I knew a couple of his songs beforehand, but this is what really made me fall in love with his work, and what made me find the Rainbow Rising album that Braden mentioned earlier. By far, my number one favorite track on this album is the Ronnie Rising medley written by Metallica. It's, I think, 4 Dio songs from like when he was just Dio, when he was with Rainbow. It's beautiful. Next up, we have Out From the Dark by Mayhem. So if you watched my previous video, you know that there's some stuff going down with Mayhem. Unfortunately, the guy on this album is no longer with us, as he committed suicide in 1996, I think. Now, this album is in no way good quality. It is not covered tracks. They're not studio tracks. They're not live tracks. This is a rehearsal. All of the songs on this album are just them rehearsing. And I still bought it, and I still don't regret it. Partly because there's not a lot of hard copy media out there featuring Dead as the vocalist. You can hear Dead on this album. Next up is Ninja Sex Party's Under the Covers 3. So Ninja Sex Party is a 2-person band, sometimes featuring another band called a Tupperware Remix Party, better known as Twerp. But the frontman of this album is Danny Sexbang. He is one of my most favorite vocalists out there. He is a fantastic musician, and he has given me a lot of influence and a lot of confidence in my musicianship. And what's cool about this band is that Daniel Avedon and Brian Wecht both take up different personas when they're playing with the band. For example, Brian Wecht becomes Ninja Brian, where he does not speak, and Dan Avedon becomes Danny Sexbang, which is this overcompensating sex god, I guess. I don't know. I can't really get a read on his personality, but they make a great team. So Under the Covers 3 is a cover album, a bunch of songs from like the 70s, 80s, maybe 90s rock, all fully covered by them, and quite frankly, some of these I prefer more than the originals. I think that's mainly because I wasn't alive when the songs came out. I definitely heard the songs before I heard them play them, but I prefer their versions. Another big flex, it's signed. I love them. So this next one's a bit of a two-parter. This is Starbomb's debut album. Now, Starbomb is a 3-person band featuring the same people from Ninja Sex Party, Danny Avedon and Brian Wecht, but it also features Aaron Hansen. Now, if the name Aaron Hansen sounds familiar to you, you probably have watched him on Game Grumps or know him as Ego Raptor. But Dan and Aaron both work together along with Brian Wecht, for this album, where they sing about video games. Now I discovered these guys because of my friend Albert. He showed me the album, and I bought it almost immediately after hearing a lot of their songs. And then I also got into Game Grumps, which later got me into Super Mega, which eventually got me into using a camera for making YouTube videos, which eventually landed me in film school. So thanks to Starbomb, I'm a film major. Starbomb only has 3 albums out, the first of which is their strongest, second of which is their second best, and third of which is decent. Tupperware Remix Party, I believe, is also on this album, and it's announced on the first track that this might be the last album that Starbomb makes, which makes me sad. But I have this copy signed as well. I got Dan Avidan right there, Ninja Brian right there, and Aaron Hansen right there. I'm just super stoked for that. I love it. This is going to be a bit of a controversial take, but I think California by Blink-182 is my favorite Blink album. When this album came out, I was hanging out with my buddy Skylar, and we pretty much obsessed over this album as we went out on a road trip through California. We nonstop listened to this album. To this day, when I listen to it, I think about Colorado, and it's really nice. And every time I hear it, I think about, you know, high school, and it's very nostalgic for me. Next up is Hydrograd by Stone Sour. Now, I'm a simp for Corey Taylor. I know he's kind of an asshole in real life because someone I know actually met him and he was a bit of a dick to them. But regardless, his lyrics are amazing. His life story is tragically uplifting. And honestly, he's just a damn good musician. If there's any rock celebrities out there I would be able to meet, it'd be Dave Grohl and Corey Taylor. But Hydrograd came out in, I believe, 2016. I was still in high school. I was listening to a lot of Slipknot. And someone told me, yo, Corey Taylor's also in this band. And just as I started listening to them, they came out with this album. And I listened to it, and it was kick-ass. Pretty much the whole thing, front to back, excellent stuff. Next up is Feathers and Flesh by Avatar. Now, I just mentioned my buddy Skylar. He also invited me to a Five Finger Death Punch concert once. And these guys opened up for Five Finger. And I thought they were pretty sick. Skylar didn't like them too much, but I thought they were awesome. I listened to their current album that was out at the time called Hail the Apocalypse. Pretty good. And then this album was released later on. It's a good album. But I think the coolest thing about this album is that it's inspired by, I believe, a children's book. I'm not quite sure. Next up is Adam Ilara Origin Story. I bought this album alongside a comic book. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the comic book was kind of cringe. The art style was a little mediocre, I'm not gonna lie. But this rap hip hop album, which I didn't expect because the comic book had a lot to do with rock and metal, this hip hop album is actually pretty good. They have some good bars, they got some good rhyme schemes, the music is okay. But one of my favorite bars from, I think it was the first track, was, I'm like a period, I drop it monthly. That's just funny. And last, but certainly not least, is Zurika by The Flaming Lips. Now, what's so special about this album is that it comes with 4 discs, but there are still only 8 songs on the album. The only proper way to listen to this album, which was intentional by the musicians who made the album, is to get 4 CD players and put one of each of the discs in each of the CD players and hit play as most in sync as you can. And that's the album. Each CD has a different part of the music, and as far as I can tell, it's not supposed to be synced up perfectly. Now, what's beautiful about this album is that it's not going to be perfectly synced up every time. You're going to get a new experience every time, and sometimes you can just delay it. You can just do whatever you want. You're going to get a new experience every time. I haven't done it yet, but some of my buddies want to get our cars and just like put them in a box next to each other and play the songs out of our cars. That sounds super fun. I really want to do that. There is a version of it on YouTube that you can listen to, but that's just one of many ways. Now I could keep going. I have a lot more records, a lot more CDs, and a lot more cassette tapes, but I don't think you would want to watch that even if I could do that. Now before I sign off, I'm going to give you, the viewer, some homework. For my next video, I want to be reviewing some very niche underground music that you, the viewer, submit to me. So in the comments, I want you to lead me to YouTube, Spotify, Bandcamps, playlists, whatever you can, to just send me some underground music that not a lot of people have heard, and I want to review it. But until that video comes out, I'm your host, Roach, and thank you once again for tuning in.